Forever Tainted. No, not the title of his latest hit. Rather, how Sir Cliff Richard fears he will be judged until the day he dies as a result of the appalling police investigation into unsubstantiated sex offences. The singer is now suing the BBC and South Yorkshire Police, which, many of you will recall, chose to collude and bring the raid on Sir Cliff's Berkshire home live, complete with footage shot from a helicopter of detectives rifling through his possessions. Not my sort of daytime viewing. Sir Cliff talked of his 22-month ordeal at a meeting at the House of Lords this week as part of a campaign to guarantee anonymity for suspects accused of sex crimes. Broadcaster Paul Gambaccini shared his similar ordeal. His lasted 12 months. In a way, Cliff was lucky. His beloved sister Donna lived long enough to hear her brother had been cleared. Lord Bramall was not so fortunate. His wife died, never knowing that the investigation into alleged sex crimes involving her husband, based on the outlandish claims of a man now thought to be a fantasist, was just as unfounded. Surely what's tainted here is a system that allows these sort of witch hunts to continue.
This is in danger of setting a precedent, but I have a lot of time for your argument, Nick.
Whoa.
I have a lot of time for your argument because I believe passionately in the presumption of innocence. It's the absolute bedrock of our criminal justice system. And I agree that sometimes just being accused of a sexual offence is a sentence in itself before you've been tried by a court. And I think that's really worrying. On the other hand, I think we need to acknowledge the wider context here. It is still very difficult for people who've experienced sexual assault, especially as children, but all people, to come forward. Now, in cases where the alleged perpetrator is high profile, it's even harder for somebody who was abused to expect to be believed. And in many of those cases, I mean, you mentioned Sir Cliff, and there's Paul Gambaccini as well, but then there's equally Jimmy Savile. There are other cases where...
Hang on, I don't think we can have them in the same bracket.
No,
I'm going to be careful here.
The point, and I'm not comparing them because Cliff's been exonerated, but the point that I'm making is that there are people who have been found to have committed abuse, and had they not been named, had it not been made public that these people were being accused, other victims would not have come forward.
Well, you're referring to someone such as Stuart Hall.
And the point is that by naming somebody who is alleged to have committed a sexual offence, it gives confidence to other victims who might otherwise not come forward.
I don't think that's strong enough an argument.
Given the scale of sexual abuse...
So you're saying two wrongs make a right?
I'm not saying two wrongs make a right. And I've said, I agree it's a really complex and difficult problem, but I don't think we should just write it off because there is a context in which sexual crimes go unreported, and we're not doing enough about that. And I'm worried about us saying, let's just focus on protecting alleged perpetrators when we're not doing anything about the fact that it's so hard for people to come forward.
Afua, you're right to say that the number of rapes has gone up a lot and the number of convictions has actually gone down. But I think the case of Sir Cliff Richard is an absolute shocker. And I mean, much as Lily Allen apologised on behalf of our country for the migrant crisis, I think that I'd like to say I'm sorry to Sir Cliff Richard on behalf of the BBC, because I don't think he's received an apology yet for the fact that he was his life was turned upside down and he can never escape that tag.
I think just one separate, thing, the BBC coverage, the fact that the BBC filmed a raid in real time from the general principle.
The reason we're talking about the BBC now is it is about Savile, because this was the BBC's last-ditch, Charlie come lately reaction to the fact that they got Savile completely wrong, and so they had to show that they were on the right page when it came to sexual abuse. So they went totally over the top on Sir Cliff. Just one more thing.
Sure, of course.
For example, that police raid on his house. Anyone watching it would think, how on earth are you going to find evidence in a house in Berkshire by the South Yorkshire Police, who are already tainted themselves?
Hillsborough, just to remind listeners.
How will the South Yorkshire Police find evidence 20 years after an alleged offence at a Christian rally in the 80s? It is a nonsense. And the idea that this is going to bring others to come forward is also a nonsense, and the BBC should have been ashamed of itself.
James, you wanted to get in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really passionate about this point because everything I've read, what we're trying to justify is we're saying it is perfectly acceptable to humiliate and destroy somebody's life because we think it encourages other people to come forward. I'm sorry, I cannot accept that, because if you want to come forward, that's a separate issue. But are we sitting here today and saying that we're going to destroy this man's life. It's perfectly okay. You know, he can never recover from that, but that just gives other people the opportunity to come forward. I think it's ridiculous.
I think what you're saying is really important, and for me, this goes to the root of the issue, right? There is no reason why...
this better be good.
Because listen to me. There is no reason why, because you're accused of an offence, your life should be ruined. I wish we had a country where we understood the presumption of innocence, right? Somebody who's been accused of offence is not proven guilty. We shouldn't be pillaring them. We shouldn't be destroying their reputation. We shouldn't be holding them up as an example of someone who's convicted. At the same time, I wish we lived in a society where victims were taken seriously. And this is important.
I think that's James's point.
Look at the Ched Evans trial. The woman who alleged that she'd been raped by Ched Evans has been absolutely paraded through social media and humiliated and degraded. And people don't seem to understand that if somebody
But she wasn't named, Afua.
No, I know, but I'm
you've
saying...
just demolished your own argument.
No, I haven't. This is one problem with public opinion. It's the same tendency that refuses to accept that someone accused of offence is not guilty, and also refuses to accept that somebody who doesn't find their perpetrator convicted may not have been lying. And it's the same thing. This is a nuanced thing. When someone's accused of a crime, there should be a process. We shouldn't be parading and vilifying anybody.
I've got a process, but I want to hear from Michelle first. I have got the solution, everybody.
Well,
Don't worry.
What I think is what we've just been hearing about Cliff Richard broadcasting, raids on houses. I think that's disgraceful because you're bordering on creating entertainment value out of something that's incredibly serious. So,
they interrupted the news.
Yeah, I think that's disgraceful. Whoever the person is, I think that's absolutely wrong and it's gone too far. But I also think that you can't have total anonymity. I can't say that word. You can't keep them anonymous if you've been accused of something. Thank you. This took me a long time. Because in order to secure a conviction, you have to get enough evidence. To get the evidence, you have to open it up and say, this is what's going on. Has anyone else experienced this? But in the cases that you're describing here, it went way, way, way too far.
So here's my solution, panel, and then I'll whiz around and see what you think about it. This is how I think you do. Let's say the case of Mr. X, who is a famous pop star, and somebody comes forward and says that he or she was inappropriately touched. Instead of going on a fishing trip, which is what they call where they throw names like Sir Cliff Richard and Paul Gambaccini and others out, the police then have to present to a judge who is then precluded from sitting on the trial. The judge hears the evidence. If he or she is happy that there could be a case to proceed, then yes, the naming of Mr. X will take place. Otherwise, presumption of innocence, Mr. X will never know about it. So as long as a judge, even a High Court judge, is satisfied that there looks like a case to answer, then we can identify Mr. X. Rachel?
I think it's better than the flypaper one, where you throw somebody's name out to the mob, and then you see whether anyone else comes forward. Better, yes.
Better and not perfect, yeah.
Better.
But I think the judge should only be allowed to make a decision if there is, what do they say, beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah, okay.
You can't just come forward.
But that's what a jury...
But that's too late. By then, you've destroyed the guy. What I'm saying is, before you shame the guy, make sure you've got a case to answer.
But isn't that where my judge comes in?
Yeah, absolutely right.
Michelle?
I don't see how it would work.
I'll just say, for those reasons, Nick, I'm in.
I don't see how that would work without having enough supporting evidence, and you would get that supporting evidence by opening it up. And
because you say, we've got this fantastic... Look, we believe in this witness. Here are his or her witness statements. Please read them. Mr. X makes a complaint. He knows about... the victim knows about birthmarks on various parts of Mr. X's appendage. We really feel confident about this. We're also picking up on quite a lot of rumours. We want to name Mr. X.
So you've got almost a sanity... What you're saying is you want almost like a sanity check before it starts getting published.
The judge says,
I'm happy.
Yeah, all right, name him.
Yeah, I kind of get your point.
First of all, that's what should happen to an extent before someone's charged. There has to be evidence before the police decide to charge anyway.
There has to be sufficient evidence.
I know what you're saying is a much higher standard than that.
Hasn't happened in these other cases.
I've got time for that as a suggestion, but
I've won today.
I just want to finish by saying my concern would be the message it sends to a victim that you are going to be scrutinised by a judge at an early stage to see whether you're...
I think that makes a lot of sense, but let's talk about something different now.